How about Senator West on Senate Bill 111?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members. Senate Bill 11 is a refile of Senate Bill 2114 that passed the Senate 30-0 last session. This bill would amend Chapter 2 of the Code of Criminal Procedure to require a law enforcement agency files a case with the attorney representing the state to submit to the prosecutor a written statement from a person with knowledge employed by the agency which attests that all exculpatory, impeaching, or mitigating evidence in the possession of the investigating agency has in fact been released to the state's attorney at the time a case is filed and upon discovery of additional information to make certain that the information is also updated with the state's attorney. We have a committee substitute that it was brought to us, frankly, by I think the city of Fort Worth, and what it does, this contains language passed out of the House Criminal Jurisprudence Committee. The substitute language will exempt non-traffic violation Class C misdemeanor offenses.
Is there objection to adoption of the substitute? Chair is none, so granted. We've got some witnesses. Richard Miles is present, would like to testify. Mr. Miles? Do you need kin to a guy named Boris Miles?
I don't know.
You never know, Boris. State your name and who you represent, please.
Richard Miles. I'm representing myself and it's the Texas exonerees.
Yes, sir. Try to limit it to about 2 minutes if you can.
Yes, sir, I will. Good morning to this distinguished committee and collective body. My name is Richard Miles, and I'm a husband, father, and also the founder and president of Miles of Freedom. I'm here to testify in favor for Senate Bill 111. At the age of 19, I was wrongfully arrested and charged for the offense of murder and attempted murder. 17 months later, one court-appointed attorney and a 7-day jury trial yielded to a verdict of guilty. At the age of 20, I received 60 years in the Texas Department of Corrections for a crime that I did not commit. I would spend the next 15 years of my life as an innocent man in the Texas prison system. I was blessed to have the continued support of my family, friends, and a host of people that advocated and fought for my innocence. In July of 1997, my direct appeal was denied. We could not afford my transcripts, but my father and I filed a Freedom of Information Act with the Dallas Police Department in 2004. With no transcripts and finding nothing of substance in the police files, I filed my own writ of habeas corpus 1107 in 2005 on grounds of actual innocence. My writ was denied in 2006. However, in October of 2007, 11 years after my wrongful arrest and ultimate conviction, Centurion, an innocence organization out of Princeton, New Jersey, took interest in my case, purchased and sent my trial transcripts and police records. That night, I sat on the floor of my cell on the Cofield unit, and I read every page in my transcripts. Reaching for the police files that was sent by Centurion, I was shocked to see the files were double in the size that my father had sent 4 years prior. It was in these files that I would discover for the first time exculpatory evidence that was gathered before my trial but never presented.
Go ahead. Ignore the time and give us your story.
One document that was presented says such: an unknown female called and stated that she possibly had some information about a shooting that occurred by Bachman Lake sometime last year between 1994, May and June. She stated that her ex-boyfriend of hers told her about the shooting. She stated the police had the wrong person. This was one document amongst many that was in my police files. If Senate Bill 111 is passed, this is not an assault on any police institution whatsoever. This is basically a request for transparency, integrity, and accountability upon our departments. A recent report by the National Exoneree Registry revealed as of March 21st, Texas has 385 exonerations. Of that 385 exonerations, 57 involve police misconduct. In 2013, the Michael Morton Act was passed to hold prosecutors accountable for their inactions or actions. It is my request today that Senate Bill 111 is passed on that same grounds. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Miles. You're an impressive individual. Senator Bittencourt?
Mr. Miles, I just want to say, you can't get back your time, but you can get back with somebody else's time by supporting a bill like this.
Yes, sir.
And I want to thank you for your fortitude.
Thank you, sir.
Catalin McCamish? State your name and who you represent, please.
My name is Caitlin McCamish, and I am a prosecutor with the Bexar County Criminal District Attorney's Office. We are here today in support of Senate Bill 111. What we think is that this will close the loophole that there is in 3914, essentially requiring prosecutors to ensure that we're turning everything over with no assurance from the police that we are receiving everything. While preparing for coming today, I spoke with quite a few prosecutors who all shared stories with me, and I've experienced it myself, where in the middle of testimony or in the middle of a trial, a supplemental police report will come out that we didn't know about, or a written statement from a witness will be referenced by a detective that we've never seen before. Those situations very often end in mistrials, which just delays justice for the victims, and also it delays justice for people like Mr. Miles, who are in situations where they are not receiving full discovery, not through any fault of the prosecutors, but they didn't have it either. And so, as the Texas Rules of Disciplinary or Conduct state that, the role of prosecutors is to see that justice is done, I think that Senate Bill 111 will ensure that we are seeking justice as required.
Very good. Any questions? Thank you for appearing. Christian?
Just a quick question, if I may.
Senator Hinojosa?
I guess, because I read other cases, and the real issue there is that while the district attorney's office turns over all the information they have, sometimes a police officer or a police department will not turn over the files they have during the investigation that may have exculpatory evidence.
Yes, sir, and that puts us in quite a situation or quite a predicament, right? We're trying to be as transparent and ensure that trials are as fair as possible, and we're finding that we're not able to do that if we're not being given the full file.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Christian Henriksen? State your name and who you represent.
Yeah, my name is Christian Henriksen. I'm the Chief of Litigation at the Bexar County DA's office, and as Caitlin said, we support this bill. We have, one of the things that I've heard from our prosecutors over and over again is the anxiety that they feel when they have a duty under the Michael Morton Act to turn over evidence. They do everything in there that they can to make sure that that happens, but can be in a situation, and as we've seen happen repeatedly, where they end up in trial, as Caitlin said, and there's evidence that they didn't know about that should have been turned over and it wasn't. That creates all sorts of problems, like Caitlin said, with mistrials, with evidence sometimes not being able to be admitted into evidence that would have been helpful to the state, that would have helped prove a righteous case. That creates a lot of problems for us, and it creates a lot, like I said, a lot of anxiety among our prosecutors who are worried for their law licenses when they have an obligation to turn over evidence, yet the people who have to provide that evidence to them don't have that duty themselves under the law. I had a conversation with a representative of one of our local law enforcement agencies bringing up this problem and trying to get some help, some assistance in what they thought we could do to address this and make sure that we get everything from them that we're required to turn over. And ultimately what he said to me, and this is a person that I have a lot of respect for, that I've known very well for a long time, and his ultimate answer was, it's not our problem. Y'all have to figure it out. It's your problem. We don't have the time to deal with it, basically. But in order for Michael Morton to work the way that it was supposed to, prosecutors can't fix this problem by themselves. We need law enforcement to have the duty to turn over the evidence to us that we're required to disclose to the defense in the interest of victims and the interest of defendants.
Very good. Thank you for being here. Douglas Gladden? Your name and who you represent?
Yes, my name is Douglas Gladden. I'm an assistant district attorney with the Dallas County District Attorney's Office. I'm in the appellate division, and I work with the public integrity and civil rights divisions as well. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm here to testify in support of Senate Bill 111. This bill does two things. It requires law enforcement agencies to acknowledge when they file a case that they have turned over all evidence to prosecutors. And then after they file the case, it requires them to turn over any new evidence that they find. This is common sense legislation that bridges a gap in the criminal discovery process. Prosecutors, as you've heard, have a duty to disclose evidence. But right now, there is no requirement for law enforcement to disclose evidence to prosecutors. I want to give you an example of how this can happen in just a run-of-the-mill case. 2 years ago in Dallas County, we learned that when the Dallas Police Department impounds a vehicle after an arrest, they fill out an impound form that contains information not only about the arrest, but basically facts of the case. These forms are evidence. We didn't even know they existed until 2 years ago. And as far as I'm aware, those were never disclosed to defendants in the cases until we found out about it. During one trial that I saw of a drug dealer who shot at Dallas police officers while serving a warrant, it came out mid-trial that the controlled drug buy at the drug house that the warrant was based on was recorded. That was never turned over to prosecutors, and we learned about it in the middle of trial. And many of you are aware that 2 years ago here in Austin, a mistrial was declared in a murder case when it was revealed that the police did not turn over a box full of photographs of the crime scene. Today you've heard from Richard Miles, who was wrongly convicted in part because exculpatory evidence was not turned over to prosecutors. These cases and numerous others like them happen because police withhold evidence from prosecutors who then don't have it to turn over to the defense. When prosecutors don't turn over evidence, it's called a Brady violation. When the police don't turn over evidence, it's not called anything. This bill would change that. I would ask that this committee bridge the gap in the discovery process and pass this bill.
Thank you, Senator Huffman.
Yeah, just for clarification, to definitely support the bill. I just want to make sure I understand. So does the bill, and maybe I need to ask Senator West this, does the bill make it clear that the police have a continuing obligation to turn over? Because,
Yes.
I mean, many times when the case is first filed, the police don't have everything to turn over at that point. So is that clear that it's not just a place and time, but
It is.
an actually
It's a
continuing obligation?
It's a continuing
Yeah.
obligation.
So
Some
my
cases.
question is, so at some point they have some evidence, but let's say they're still working on it, still talking to witnesses. They don't have an obligation just to continue to, or do they, to feed the information to the prosecutor, or can they sort of complete their investigation, have their file, turn it over? Because, a lot of times thinking practically, you don't really get everything sometimes till you're preparing for a trial, and then sometimes there's more evidence.
Are you addressing it to me or?
Whoever you can best
If you look
answer,
at, if you look on page 2 of the bill, under C,
Yes,
if at any time after the case is filed with the representing the state law enforcement agent discovers or acquires additional documents, blah, 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 blah.
but at the time they file with the prosecutor, are they required to give everything?
Well, they're required to give everything in their possession.
Okay, always,
Right.
okay.
They're required to give everything in their possession. And if they get additional information, then under the section C, subsection C, they would be required to provide. It's just like continuum discovery.
I'm just thinking about, again, I very much support your bill and the concept, I just want to make sure it works.
Operationally, it works.
Right, so I'm thinking about like in these big prosecutor's office where there's hundreds of cases and now thousands of backlog cases, that we want to make sure that this is a seamless process, and I'm just trying to
But you
think
see,
out loud.
and the way I look at it, having worked in the prosecutor's office,
Yeah.
if I get a case, when I used to get a case from an investigator who files the case,
Mm-hmm.
that investigator's tied to that case until it's disposed of. And so
Yeah.
that ends up being the liaison, so to speak, with the police department.
Right.
That I would use as the conduit in order to make certain that everything that I needed for that particular
Yeah.
case was in fact provided.
Right.
And that's operationally, I think that's the way most prosecutor offices work.
Right. And I would just hope that the prosecutors and the police would all work together, and at the end of the case is getting ready to go to trial, there was like one final, clearance. Do you have everything? It's almost, I think that's the point where it's most critical, right?
No,
Because
I agree with you.
So I don't, it almost seems like the bill should focus on, like, we're getting, this is the end of the process. Do we have everything? There should be a continuing duty, but the real duty should be when we've completed our investigation and this is what we have.
Let me tell you a story.
But-
The last case I tried as an assistant district attorney in Dallas County, I lost. And it was a murder case. And based on exactly what you just said, Senator Huffman, I had a meeting with the investigator right before we decided to go to trial, only to find out through the victim's wife that he had a knife, and she picked the knife up and wasn't a part of the police report.
Yes,
Okay, and
Right.
I had a duty to turn it over to the
Sure.
prosecutor, to the defense.
sure.
It's conceivable, though, Senator Huffman, that after the start, the police could run across or be furnished additional information.
Well, that was kind of my point. So the real
ongoing
duty should,
responsibility needs
Yeah.
to be there as
Yeah.
well.
I just want it to work.
Sure.
Because I
This
know in
provides
these
it.
backlogs, and there's so many, we don't know what they're facing. And probably Dallas is similar, I would assume, to what Houston is facing.
Well, right. And,
Big the smaller jurisdictions, they probably can communicate a little bit
But even though
better.
you have those backlogs, Senator,
Yeah.
you have an investigator who filed the case
Yes.
with the district attorney's
Right.
office that's responsible for the case.
Yeah.
And so that person should be, I think, operationally responsible for providing
Right.
any additional discovery.
Yeah, but
Very good.
unfortunately, I think what's happening is some of these cases are sitting around for a long, long time, and maybe there is more stuff coming in, but no one is focused on it. But as long as, there's a continuing duty, we've made that clear.
Right.
And at the end, there should be a communication between the police and the prosecutor. Yes, we have everything.
Right.
And, yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gladden.
Thank you.
Joe Gonzalez, no testimony, in support, Bear County Criminal Judge, District Attorney's Office. Jason Hermes, Dallas District Attorney's Office, in support, no testimony. I think that's it. A couple offices. Hold on a second. David Sinclair does not wish to testify, but he is against it, and he speaks on behalf of the Game Wardens Peace Officer Association. Mitch Landry, Texas Municipal Police Association, in opposition, does not wish to testify. Anyone else present would like to testify for or against Senate Bill 111? Not, public testimony is closed.